Hello, everyone, and welcome to Passive House Accelerator Live, where we explore how to slash the greenhouse gas emissions from our buildings and make them more resilient to the impacts of climate change. I'm Zach Simke. I am Director of Passive House Accelerator, and very excited to have you join us for this special Field Notes episode of Passive House Accelerator Live, where we're joined by members of the Reimagine Summer Labs. So we're over the summer in the Reimagine Buildings Collective, we've been holding a series of small think and do tanks, each focused on a particular challenge or opportunity in the realm of building decarbonization and climate resilience. So today we are joined by 4 of the 8 Summer Labs to hear from them about the insights that they produced and discovered and uncovered and are articulating from that process this last summer. So each Summer Lab met 3 or 4 times over the course of the summer to discuss their topic and to tease apart kind of what are the obstacles to progress, what are the key moves to make, and then have put those together into a short insight brief. And so today we get a sneak peek before these insight briefs are published from 4 of those labs. And so we'll be hearing today from the Passive Survivability Lab, the Selling Passive House Lab, the Nature-Based Performance Lab, and the AIA Enhanced Practice Lab. That brings me to the first presentation, and that's going to be with Greg Bishop, who is one of the members of the Nature-Based Performance Lab. Greg is an architect here in my hometown of Seattle and has become a friend as well, and it's really great to have you kick us off, Greg. So I should also share that each summer lab has like 4 to 6 people in it, and they've been collaborating together to produce this insight brief work that we're going to hear about. So with that, Greg, I'll hand it off to you.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. I appreciate that. Good morning. Yes, I'm Greg Bishop, and I'm representing the Science Bio-Based Materials Lab group, and we were composed of members Chris Magwood and Buck Moorhead and Nidhi Shah, Tom Hootman, myself, and Ranger Finney. And unfortunately, Chris and Buck, I see Buck is here. And Tom and Ranger are not able to join us today. So I'm just going to be presenting our material and for discussion. So our challenge studying bio-based materials was we asked the question, can bio-based materials such as straw, hemp, cellulose, and wood fiber not only meet, but enhance the goals of high-performance building design? So high-performance design aims to deliver buildings that are healthy, comfortable, safe, durable, and regenerative. Achieving this requires airtight and watertight construction, vapor-open assemblies for drying, adequate insulation for comfort, and ventilation for clean air. It also means using fire-safe materials that minimize flame spread and toxic smoke. So the top takeaways from our group research was 1, bio-based materials align with those performance goals. Materials like straw, hemp, cellulose, and wood fiber are vapor open. They're hygroscopic, heat buffering, and can improve airtightness when dense packed. They also store carbon, come from renewable resources, and char predictably under fire exposure without producing large amounts of toxic smoke. Bio-based material performance is a synergistic match with low energy and passive house buildings, and many of these materials are inherently regenerative. The second takeaway, they outperform and have proven precedent. Compared to many petroleum-based options, bio-based insulation offers better moisture management, resilience against mold and rot, and improved thermal comfort in climates with wide temperature swings, especially when paired with modern detailing and membranes. Cellulose insulation is a strong precedent, dense packed, vapor open, hygroscopic, and already trusted and widely used in North America. Highlighting cellulose alongside new demonstration projects shows that bio-based materials are not risky novelties, but logical extensions of assemblies that are designed to dry properly. But logical extensions of a proven approach, Note, properties like hydroscopic buffering are only beneficial when assemblies are designed to dry properly. If drying is restricted, such as by non-permeable finishes, these same materials can retain excess moisture. Considering the whole assembly and real-world occupant behavior is essential to manage this risk. Our third takeaway, research, testing, and code adoption are crucial. Designers and builders may hesitate until insurers and code officials are convinced. The challenge is less about material performance and more about validation and advocacy. Important testing is already underway, but its impact would grow with stronger coordination, funding, and visibility. Building on existing efforts through shared research, demonstration projects, and advocacy for code updates will be key. Fourth takeaway, policy and market drivers can accelerate adoption. The UK and Europe are far ahead of the US in adopting bio-based materials, partly due to whole life carbon assessments and targets. Establishing similar frameworks in the USA could drive stronger market demand. At the same time, the rapid growth of mass timber construction in the USA offers a platform to leverage this interest and growth to promote a wider range of biomass-based material options. What's next? To make bio-based materials a standard part of high-performance design in North America, the next steps are clear. Step 1, expand research and testing. We need to strengthen the evidence base for durability, fire safety, and long-term performance. Aggregate that information from completed projects, both recent builds and older examples, to give confidence in long-term outcomes. We need to work with the Bio-Based Materials Collective to encourage researchers, testing groups, designers, and builders to collect and share that data in accessible formats, ensuring that anyone exploring these materials can easily find reliable and trustworthy information. Second step is to advance code adoption. We need to translate these results into recognized pathways for approval in regional and national codes. Demonstrating proven compliance helps remove regulatory barriers and provides design teams with clear, repeatable routes to approval. The third step is to showcase success. MAP recently completed an in-progress demonstration projects using cellulose, straw, wood fiber, and other bio-based materials. We need to standardize data monitoring and testing protocols for these projects and create a shared portal, potentially stewarded by the Bio-Based Materials Collective, to collect and publish this information, including options for anonymous contribution. By making this knowledge accessible and searchable, we can normalize bio-based solutions, highlight successful precedents, and accelerate adoption across the industry. So the question we leave with, how can we collectively accelerate the research, code adoption, and storytelling needed to make bio-based materials a trusted default in North American high-performance construction? And I'll leave it at that.
Excellent, Greg. Thank you. That was very tight. That's great. So we encourage people to be, and we got some applause. Excellent, excellent. So that was awesome. We're going to be doing 4 of these presentations, folks in the audience, and so we encourage people to be asking questions as we go, so that we can have a conversation and dialogue at the end here. So please, as those questions occur to you, please type them into chat. We'll be tracking them and then having that exchange and conversation. So next up, we have the Passive Survivability Lab represented by Lloyd Alter.
Hi, everyone. I want to apologize for not having any slides. We're in the middle of a work in progress in doing this document. One thing we found about this really wonderful project, this idea of these summer labs, we only had 4 meetings and we were told to limit our documentation to like 4 points and 2 pages. And this really made us focus and concentrate our minds. We could have gone on for much, much longer, but I think the mandate was really thought out well, because all of the results that I've heard so far were really interesting and powerful stuff. So I'll just go over mine here, the group I'm part of, Passive Survivability. No power, no problems, the question. And the team was Valerie Amore, Mike Fowler, Chloe Hellerman, David Comet, Al Mitchell, Talo Tapani, and me. And first we had to talk about what do we mean by passive survivability. Now, if you go back a decade or so to the 2014 polar vortex, everybody in the passive house industry was showing these wonderful drawings about how the temperature didn't drop inside the passive house, even as the polar vortex was going on outside. And we've been talking about this ever since. But in fact, even in the decade, things have changed. We have to also really worry about extreme heat. And, it was put out, you know, passive survivability now has to prioritize summer overheating above winter cold because heat and heat-related deaths kill more people every year, and on average in the past 30 years, more than any other weather-related event. And in passive design buildings, due to superior insulation and air tightness, once heat from air temperature or sunlight enters, it stays inside until it can be flushed out. And so this is particularly an issue that has to change the way we look at it. One size does not fit all. We found studies that if you get to above a 31 degrees Celsius or 87 degree wet bulb temperature, the body can no longer effectively regulate heat stroke or death. And in much of Europe, to Dale's question about why limit ourselves to North America, we're not. In much of Europe, they were facing a lot of that this summer. So prolonged exposure above these levels can lead to heat stroke or death. And for older and disadvantaged populations who are vulnerable to heat, that heat stress point is even lower. The passive house can only go so far as a thermal battery for keeping cool. If the wet bulb temperatures stay high, dehumidification becomes essential. And this is where we came up with our issue that really we're going to start needing active systems as well as passive systems. The building can probably coast for a couple of days through a cold or a smoke event because of its insulation or air tightness, but eventually interior air quality begins to deteriorate due to buildup of CO2 and humidity. And passive house does not provide ventilation when the power goes out. And so we're coming out of this exercise considering that we should be considering installing small backup battery systems to keep HRVs, ERV fans operating. And it could be a small and simple system, backup system, with a low power draw. But we have to start thinking about ways we could do this. And in hot and humid climates, the humidity is going to be the dominant factor in thermal comfort during extreme heat. And we might have to consider what can we do mechanically with backup power to deal with the fact that we need an issue of humidification. How am I on time? Oh, 3:59, lots of time. The other thing is that we have to think about the optimization of our passive designs. Andrew Mitchler writes from experience and has done a post about it, about how simple forms, eliminating corners and crevices where firebrands can grab hope, eliminating vents, careful selection of materials, and continuous wrap of non-combustible insulation is going to be a matter of concern to improve fire resilience. And we also have to consider our contribution to the climate crisis and what we have to survive from in the first place. And rather than contributing to the problem of climate change, we should be reducing the use of materials with high embodied carbon, and plans should be optimized to reduce building area and the absolute demand for energy, not just our relatives per square foot. But we have to think about absolute reducing demand for a couple of reasons. One, because when it goes out, if you reduce demand, then you need to worry less about how much might you be generating yourself through solar panels and batteries. There was some talk about we've got to think about integrating electric cars, which carry massive, massive batteries, that maybe we should be figuring out a way to plug them into our houses, and they could run the ERVs and HRVs. When passive first design where it can succeed in limiting summer heat gain with an optimized building enclosure and proper shading. The most important metric in design is a low BTU per hour per square foot to minimize peak cooling. This single metric reduces mechanical equipment sizes that are grid friendly and creates favorable conditions of survivability during periods of power outages and extreme events. Passive buildings should not just be a well-equipped lifeboat riding out the storm. From first principles, it should be part of the solution, reducing demand and perhaps even giving back. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lloyd. And you were, I think, touching on the interrelations as well between the topics that we've been tackling in the summer labs. You touched on the fire resilience aspects, for example, and I think that would be a really interesting line of inquiry and conversation. I think today is once we've presented these four insights from 4 of the 8 labs, is to explore where there is that overlap between the insights that you all have been generating in these different groups.
Yeah, I'm sorry I was just reading that. I'm so used to going bam, bam, bam with slides that I sort of got lost there a few times. I hope it was comprehensible.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It was excellent. It was excellent. Thank you. Okay, so next up we have Selling Passive House group, Summer Lab, with James Turner.
Hi, everyone. So the working title that we ended up going with for our presentation, insight brief, is The Best Way to Sell Passive House? Don't. Our group consisted of Lloyd Alter, editor, adjunct professor, and author at Carbon Upfront; Trey Farmer, architect and partner at Forgecraft Architecture; Bo Green, architect and chapter lead for Passive House DC; Paul Heron, who's on the call. Hi, Paul. Principal and founding member of Sage Craftsman LLC; Silas Patlove, who's a PA in emergency medicine and a CPHC, who was cool to have him in the group; and myself, James Turner, marketing consultant and host of the Marketing Passive House podcast. So our challenge, as we put it, was this: forget your PHPP, don't mention thermal bridging, keep your airtightness rating in your back pocket. As the great sales leader Zig Ziglar said, people don't buy for logical reasons, they buy for emotional reasons. And that's as true with Passive House as it is with cars, phones, and toasters. So that was kind of like, we thought of a lot of different ways to tackle this topic of selling Passive House. And the largest takeaway was that, just that no matter who you're selling Passive House to, you have to consider that they're not buying for logical reasons, nor not the logical reasons that you think that they're buying for, perhaps. So our top takeaways: whether you're selling the Passive House idea at the single-family, residential, multifamily, mixed-use, commercial, institutional, or legislative level, it's important to remember that each person you're dealing with has their own emotional, often irrational version of success for their project. So your job is to ask about their pains and listen. And more often than not, the solution to their pains will lead back to Passive House, but that doesn't need to be a part of the discussion necessarily, and certainly not at the start. Now, Trey, sort of anecdotally, I mean, but he found that when he advertised Passive House, he would often attract people who can't or think they can't afford it. And like the people who have the money aren't as interested or aren't doing it. And with that, he also found that if people don't have the budget to build the Passive House, they probably just don't have the budget to build a house, period. But so again, leading with Passive House attracted a certain section of people that he found, in his experience, just like were kind of dreamers, I suppose, more than being realistic. In Lloyd's 2019 article, How Do You Sell the Idea of Passive House? Yes, it was great having him in our lab. He shared another Zig Ziglar quote, which is this: people are basically the same the world over. Everybody wants the same things: to be happy, to be healthy, to be reasonably prosperous, and to be secure. Lloyd then went on to list the selling points of Passive House in order of how he deemed their importance at that time to be comfort, air quality, quiet, security, meaning energy security, resilience, passive habitability, luxury, and health. And now, based on what he's seeing, reading, and hearing, Lloyd reckoned he'd change the order to put security closer to the start, which ties in nicely to the topic that you just presented on Lloyd. Bo Green, who works at the larger end of the scale, he has his eyes set on large-scale projects because his thinking is that they are the quickest way to convert the largest square footage to passive house. And he always talks about moving from the S word, sustainability, to the C word, cash, in his messaging, speaking to that, know the pains of your audience. Now, Bo is kind enough to actually get us some guest speakers, one of whom is Beth Eckenrode, who's on the call today as well. Hi, Beth. And Matthew Bowers, both from the Oros Group, and Greg Farley, who's the Director of University Sustainability at George Mason U. And in the course of that sort of guest call that we had, Beth and Matthew showed this slide that I'm going to try to bring up here. So it's just that one. I've been told this was okay to do. Yeah, so this slide was a slide from Beth's work, and hopefully, Beth, if you're around for Q&A, maybe if there are questions about it. But we thought that this was the most compelling at the large scale description here, and I'll just keep reading from my notes. So in the guest session with Beth, Matthew, and Greg, the following slide, which shows the projected energy cost savings of making different sections of a large project passive house, with the red line being doing nothing, keeping things the same, and then the blue and purple lines representing the savings of switching to passive house. Everyone was astounded and included basically a 5 to 6 year ROI, which Greg, who is the Director of University Sustainability, said, if we could show my CFO a figure like this one, it would be much simpler to argue in favor of high performance building envelopes. And in this, Beth brought up this great concept of the like optimizing your building. Like, instead of talking about, if you spend a little more on this, you get a little bit back in results. What is the potential? And so there's an opportunity cost to not doing it. And that's again, speaking to the pain point of wanting to invest wisely at that larger scale, the people who aren't going to be necessarily living in the houses. So it's an interesting difference. I'll stop sharing now and go back to, and then later in the sort of timeline, Paul and Bo both attended the FIAS marketing webinar, and they sort of noticed that many of the participants were hung up trying to figure out how to sell the data points and Passive House itself by name, rather than identifying and solving the client's problem. And they were saying that in the chat, there were lots of people commenting how it isn't really working. And someone pointed out that several different people are trying to sell consumers lowered energy bills. Like, it's not just Passive House. And so having that be a selling point of Passive House doesn't really work, because it's not a point of differentiation. There's lots of other people working on that same problem. So, and to sum it up, what's next? The benefits and amenities sell. That it is the Passive House standard that brings those benefits is an afterthought, an interesting footnote. Whether it's the large-scale developer looking for the best possible ROI, the multifamily builder looking for sound isolated, high-end units to attract better buyers, or the single-family owner looking to build a home that will keep their family safe and secure, the key to helping them get what they are looking for is to listen to them, talk about their pains and desires, figure out what those are, and then sell them solutions that address those needs, without requiring them to care that it's Passive House that makes it happen. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, James. Excellent insights. And I've got some questions here that I'm looking forward to diving into as well, in terms of applying that rubric to beyond to different audiences, I guess. But before we get to that, let's dive into our final presentation today, which is from the AI Enhanced Practice Summer Lab. And we have Randall Anway here to present and share their insights. Randy, it looks like you're muted.
Okay, great. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, looks great.
Okay, so just going to go through some of the key takeaways of our lab. So here's our group. I hope we got everybody. Myself, Randall Anway, Rayan Ghazal, James Kupfer-Smith, Sandra Lebster, Demian Rybach, Galen Stengel, Mike Wong, Eric Seiss. What we learned, so I think one of the key takeaways is this sort of emerging landscape of large language models and diffusion models is generating some new creative tensions in the AEC industry. However, the current crop is not suitable for tasks requiring spatial reasoning and design capabilities, and it's also not suitable for tasks requiring high accuracy and reliability. There's really a lot to absorb because there's a lot going on. So it's important to kind of start small. And we found that there's kind of two basic realms of application. And we like to frame it in terms of what we call external and internal. The external is kind of entertaining ideas and unknowns. And I think this is especially useful for active learning about things you don't maybe know a lot about, but are interested in. And the caveat that goes with that is active learning. Don't take what you get at first blush, but use it to investigate and learn more. And also for research, such as feasibility studies, especially like first drafts of papers or studies, so on. Kind of keeping it simple and focused. And then internal, I think the idea here is augmenting what you or your community are already good at, what you are knowledgeable in. And part of that is so you can check what the output is and verify that it's useful and and appropriate for the tasks you're trying to apply it to. And also working with validated and legitimized information within a circle of trust. Some conceptual examples. So we did an experiment interacting with a simulated client to try to translate their interests to passive house features. In this particular case, we were looking at building in a wildfire sensitive area and what might that mean in terms of like design features and relation with the landscape and things like that. Also simulating structured data for Windows details database. And then the internal application might, for one example, might be to classify a group of collected window details into a database and making such details accessible through an AI-based interface that can provide interpretive and natural language guidance. Some challenges and caveats. The generated information, as I mentioned before, while it can often be really convincing, it can also often be false. So validate, and use critical thinking skills. Also, insurability and legal implications are somewhat unclear still, and I think advisable to seek guidance on that from professionals. Things like data use and responsibility. Where did the data come from and who is responsible if something goes wrong? AI utilization, who's responsible? How do you use it? How do you use it responsibly and ethically? And liability concerns and responsibility for providing correct information. Some pitfalls and concerns, and these are all kind of related to the new technology and how it works or doesn't. First off, I think transparency. You don't always know what you're getting. AI is kind of a black box, and it can be hard to explain its reasoning. It might be hard to interpret what it's saying. Cybersecurity. There are certainly new issues with hacking and also governance. This sort of relates to having trusted data as well as maintaining and establishing trust and guidance on the use of these models and tools. And finally, as I mentioned, the output can be very plausible, but false or uninterpretable. And these are often called hallucinations, especially when the information is false. So that's something you need to be aware of, and also a reason to always validate. So practical application areas. While it has issues, it can be very useful in a variety of areas. I think first off, enhancing data-driven decision-making, which is kind of a cross-cutting theme, not just for passive house projects, but also for business generally, and learning. As I mentioned before, optimizing material and energy use, and I think this kind of means helping to manage complex interactions. One of the things that these models are pretty good at is sort of managing that complexity. These models are kind of work with very numerous dimensions of information, and that can help kind of working through some of the complexity of, say, window details and all the different parameters that go into balancing energy and material issues in a design. And then certainly for non-service delivery tasks, reliability is less of a concern, such as repetitive office tasks, perhaps marketing copy, first drafts again, and research. So some future directions, certification programs and standards are evolving for AI tools and models. This technology is changing and improving continuously. This is something to keep an eye on. And if it's possible, consider participating in technology governance activity if they emerge in appropriate areas, and if it fits in with your needs. So some next steps, I think, going from this first try at a lab, I think it's important to take steps to be informed about the technology and its capabilities. I think everyone would agree with that in our lab, and also to be both curious and cautious. Seek trustworthy and knowledgeable advisors and implementers, particularly those who are paying attention to technology governance activities, emerging certifications, and kind of what's going on in the legal insurance industry. And also one of the big questions that came out is, do we continue the lab framework? Because like I said, there's a lot to learn here, and I think a lot of potential for development and accelerating passive house. So I'll leave it at that, and I will stop share.
That was awesome, Randy, and everybody got to hear the little Academy Award jingle there at the end of the time. It was also very well timed. We've got some great questions here, and first of all, thank you to all four of you for presenting and representing your summer lab today. Really excellent presentations, and this has been a super exciting process to watch unfold over the last few months, and it's really fun to be at this place where we can be sharing insights and having conversation. I'm going to do a quick thank you to the fine organizations that make our work possible here at Passive House Accelerator Live. So I am bringing up my little screen here. Bear with me for a moment. So I want to first start by thanking our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, which is the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. Thank you to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Ingui Architecture, Partel, Rockwool North America, and Zola Windows. Thanks as well to our champion sponsors, Bewizo, Cascadia Windows and Doors, European Architectural Supply, Facro, Icon Windows and Doors, Intelligent Membranes, LG Air Conditioning Technologies, and Source 2050. And thanks to our patron sponsors, Building Type, Brennan, Holstrom System, Innotech Windows and Doors, Lamelux, RDH Building Science, and Sanderson Sustainable Design. So big thank you to our sponsors. So I want to, like I said, I think that we have some kind of big fun questions to have a conversation around, but we also have some specific questions from folks here in the audience. So I want to invite people to ask those questions. And referring to Dale, your question, why limit ourselves to North America? That's an excellent question, and these are think and do tanks of people who are practitioners and grappling with their practice, which happens to be in North America, but it's not meant to be solely applicable to North America. So maybe we could go to Stephen, your question, and see, and I know that there was an answer to it a little bit, or but maybe there are other, we can crowdsource the answer a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. Great presentations by everyone, by the way. When Lloyd was presenting, he was talking about the issue of passive survivability and what happens when the power goes down. And I was reminded of two things. One, the how to design a passive house for a southern climate, which Christina Held presented, and the project was a new build, and it was the home of a professional yacht builder, and he had placed an entire DC system in the home, because I do believe it was also off-grid due to the complexity of getting the grid electric in there. And I was also reminded of a situation, or a house that I saw here in Sullivan County quite a few years ago. It was an experimental house, and it had two systems in it. One was a DC system, and one was the AC. And the house did have a battery bank to back up the DC, and everything was redundant, just one system DC, one system AC. Now that would probably be too cost prohibitive, but I'm wondering why, or can we build a ERV or HRV, depending on your need, that can be run on direct current or switchable, and use a smart battery as the backup for that in a grid outage situation for a passive house. And yeah, Paul did respond, and still there's some questions, but I'd yield to Paul if he wants to expand that out a bit more. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Paul, do you have anything to add there?
Well, I'm no expert on the systems, but most ERVs and most of our high efficiency appliances are using ECM motors, and those are DC driven. They usually have some form of transformer in it, and so I think it is within the realm of possibility. I think the greater challenge, of course, is convincing the manufacturers, or finding a way that they would actually allow a DC input, and then how do you govern the switching when the power does go out to go back and forth between those two. And you'd probably also run into warranty issues and all that other fun stuff too.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Are any other insights to share around this question of DC, folks? And Beth, it's really great to have you here, and I don't mean to put you on the spot. And if you're more in listening mode right now, it's totally great. But I wanted to just hey Beth, just invite you to share your ideas and thoughts based on what you've heard today.
Yes, so I thought James did a great job. The conversation that we had was one about how are we uniquely suited to have a conversation that doesn't start with how about passive house? And I think as building scientists, this community is uniquely positioned to bring forward a different approach called the optimum energy efficiency of a building, or optimum decarbonization potential of a building. It essentially talks about achieving and using passive building or passive house building science and the strategies around passive building science to deliver really aggressive energy reduction goals, right? Like 70% reduction, 80% reduction. Like we can routinely demonstrate that. And instead of talking about it as passive house, we talk about it as what, for an existing building, what is your building capable of achieving? Because what that essentially does is it changes the conversation from a bunch of data guys sitting in a room talking about incrementally improving a building from wherever its baseline is. It completely changes the whole headset around, okay, let's start at the bottom. What's the building capable of achieving? And then we work up from there based on constraints. If it's a new building, it's okay, how good can the design be? And so it's the same idea, but it's a different conversation, and it starts from a different, we anchor to something that's the best it can be, instead of anchoring people to, can we be incrementally better? We try to take them out of that headset before we even start talking about passive house. I thought James did a really great job of explaining. That slide was a 350,000 square foot building in Boston that wanted to make sure it was ahead of Berto. And they wanted a plan for how to stay ahead of Berto. And what they ended up finding is that, yeah, you can stay ahead of Berto and eliminate $3 million worth of fines, but you're sitting on top of 60, 70, 80, 90 million dollars of potential energy savings if you think about it the right way. So it gives developers a way to reframe their dog assets versus their strategic assets. So I don't know of a lot of developers who can find that kind of value. So we're just trying to reframe the conversation. So I hope that's helpful, Zach. I hope that's what you were looking for.
No, it's absolutely, no, it's super helpful. And I think this gets back to a key insight that the lab was sharing, which is to really understand the pains and the needs of your of who you're selling to, or your customer. And so, and that those needs and pains are very different for a single family homeowner or somebody who wants to retrofit their house or buy a new house, compared to somebody who is dealing with a 350,000 square foot building, and is, holding on to the building for a long time. And, so the suddenly the ROI and the cost implications, understanding that transformation from dog assets to real valuable assets becomes really, really powerful and really important. That's exactly, like, we can't, I think that insight that it's not one size fits all. We have to understand who we're speaking to and listen before we present the case, is just so vital. I don't know if you have anything else you want to riff on, Beth. I also want, so I'll hold there, if you want to say anything.
No, I think that's great. I like to appeal to this audience because there are skills in this audience that don't exist in most other players on most other teams. And this is a team dynamic too, because, some people on the team can be advocating one way and other people on the team can be advocating another way. So it's important to find the language that kind of cuts through and brings everybody to a common point of, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Why don't we think about it that way? So yeah, no, I everything you said, Zach, I'm spot on with you.
Yeah, awesome. And so another thing that just came up in the chat a few minutes ago was that cool chart that you shared, Lloyd. I was just going to share it here, if you don't mind. Again, I'm putting folks on the spot, but if you wouldn't mind, like, talking about this a little bit.
Yes, it's from a report done by the Shelton Group, Suzanne Shelton, which talks often about marketing to sustainability. And it's, I will put a link to the report. I have it here, but for some reason I can't get the file to pick it up. But basically she was talking about, and she has another graph in there that shows a shift where people's definition of comfort has changed over the years. The word comfort, the actual root of the word comfort, according to Siegfried Gideon, is actually the same as the Latin root for the word security. That basically Gideon was saying in Mechanization Takes Command that, if you don't feel secure, you're not going to ever be comfortable. So that actually historically comfort was based on security long before, I guess, it was worried about air quality and temperature, because you could protect yourself with a knife, but you couldn't do much about your thermal quality, I guess, back then. So I will figure out a way to either put the whole report into this chat or a link to the report. She was just going again with this graph and this discussion, noticing that as the world has changed in the last few years, people are far more concerned about their safety and security and the resilience of a building as than they used to be, where it was all, oh, gee, is this comfortable? And I think Joan Connolly made a comment. Maybe, Joan, you want to come on and talk about your comment that you've seen this change as well?
Oh, hello?
Yeah.
Hey, John.
Oh, yes. I have been studying Passive House to get my certification in being a consultant, and I have 30 years of experience in the architecture industry. I have a degree in architecture, and I've actually taught green construction. And so anyway, I have discovered over the years that people are like, yeah, I adjust my house to be comfortable. And they were missing the connection of why are they going to invest in Passive House? And then currently, I mean, in the past several years, well, I guess starting like we had Katrina, we've had natural disasters where those areas have never revived. You know, they're still like in a horrible condition after the disaster. Now, is LA going to be in a horrible condition like decades later? Yeah, people are really concerned about the safety in their home, and nobody can afford this kind of destruction. Like as a nation, we can't afford it. So if we could build homes that can withstand something, I mean, maybe your home can't withstand it. Maybe something is so horrific that it can't, but maybe most can. I mean, we got to preserve our communities.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
And that's what people are saying.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay, so
yeah, I mean, on that point, Joan, I think that one of the things that's really top of mind for me now is resilience to wildfire smoke. I think that's become something that's top of mind for probably a lot of us on this call, because it's impacted pretty much the entire continent at any given time. And so that's an example, I think, of it's not going to absolutely destroy your house, but it is it's something that makes Passive House suddenly relevant to a lot of people who wouldn't necessarily care about airtightness and air quality. Yeah.
I was managed to get the report into chat, so I recommend people download it and read it. It's a really interesting document. And I should have talked more about fire and smoke, which was in our piece, than I actually did. So I think we're going to have to pull it together a little tighter, and then maybe, Zach, you can circulate it or put it up on your site as something people can read.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we're eager to. That's great. Thanks, Lloyd. And Justin, you had a question for Randy, the AI group.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Justin.
Thank you for putting all this stuff together. I was just adding a little bit to the notes. But yeah, so I've been kind of tinkering with like ChatGPT a little bit, but I wonder if you've tried to use the AI tools to extract information from like PHP, or even import information into PHP. And like an example is like extracting the specific heat gain information from Windows, right? And I've done it in a way so that we can export that information to our BIM model, and then we can show it visually what we need to, what windows affect what. But anyway, getting that to be more, seamless, it would be a very useful tool.
A great question. So I haven't specifically tried to extract data from PHPP, but that said, I know that some models are pretty good at extracting information from documents, say PDFs, or even images. And there may be some tools starting to show up here and there for things like that. And there are also some models are pretty good at coding. So like writing a macro. If it's been trained on that particular language or script, if it's a scripting language or a macro language, if that training is somewhere in its data set, it can help accomplish that. But I do find that there are, like any other generated information, there's caveats. I mean, you have to validate. Sometimes it's helpful to read the documents, right? Because it might be trained on a different version or, not the one that you're using. So, yeah. So with some caveats, absolutely, yeah. It's quite useful for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree.
I hope that more of people starts using it that way, especially to help visualize the data more. I think that's like one of the biggest things that we do. We struggle with a little bit.
Right. Yeah. And so I think this is kind of going along the idea of starting small, like try it, and try different models. So there's there's ChatGPT, there's Gemini, there's Claude, there's, 100 other ones. And just see what works. If you have a particular thing in mind, just try a bunch of them. See if one is better than the other. If they get you closer to where you want to get with it, and then see where it goes from there.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Randy. And Joshua had a great comment earlier in the session about his experience with ChatGPT, basically saying opposite things. Like he corrected ChatGPT and then Chat said, "Oh, yes, of course." And I think probably many of us who have been playing with ChatGPT have had that experience where it's like, "Wait, that's not right." "Oh, of course, you're very correct. That is not right." And so definitely, there's definitely a little bit of buyer beware.
Yeah, that's a feature, not a bug. So
yeah. Oh, yeah.
and
Say
actually,
more about that.
It's a good strategy for using it. So what I found that is like you don't take the first answer, you get multiple answers, and you're going to get different answers, almost every time. But you'll find that some are similar, and there's variations. And that's interesting. And, so you can use that information to learn more. So, so after a couple of prompts, you may say, "Oh, I know," or a couple of tries with the same question, you might go back and say, "Oh, I noticed you answered this differently. What is that?"
Interesting. Yeah. Cool. So we have a few minutes left. If anybody has another question that they would like to post, please do. But in the meantime, I want to invite folks to either who presented or who've been listening to just reflect on, were there kind of interesting places where you saw connection between the insights that you heard from these different labs that warrant exploration. I'll say that this comes from my bias, which is that things like the big moves around decarbonization, like passive house and embodied carbon and electrification, the connection to clean energy, have a lot of important. They're harmonized, and they can be harmonized and mutually supportive in a lot of important ways, and that we'd all be better off if we surface those connections. So I don't know if anybody has anything to add. Maybe not.
One of the things that I picked up on is, from the perspective of marketing Passive House, if we look at the other groups that presented, the topics, with the exception of maybe AI, the topics were really about the things that are the challenges that are facing our potential constituents. And so when we think about that, and those challenges, that's exactly what we should be thinking about and how we should be marketing ourselves, not necessarily focusing on the label Passive House, because that's pretty nebulous. Focus on the concerns that these clients have, which are specific ones that we're investigating because we realize that they are pressing concerns within our society that need to be addressed.
Yeah, no, excellent point. Buck, what do you have something to add?
Yes, thanks, Zach. Yeah, this is a comment really. Your question, excellent as usual. This question of the connections, like it's interesting with the labs. They're actually, an intentional siloing of efforts, focusing on something which is really valuable because I spend my day I'm so I get distracted like from second to second, like something's coming in. It's crazy. And I'm not good at dealing with it. Like I belong in a cell, somewhere working. But that being said, like the siloing is really, really good. But you made me think instantly about, speaking of the nature group, which I participated in, it was, that you look at a forest and all those interconnected root systems about connecting the trees to one another and the communications and all of that,
Right.
mycelium and everything, everything is connected. So your question was I think was, how do we reconnect, the siloing groups, so I'm just, I guess, applauding your question, not giving it an answer, but that's my comment.
Yeah, thank you, Buck. Yeah, it'll be interesting to explore that one moving forward. Randy.
Yeah, just to kind of respond to that last thread of conversation, I think these AIs can be very useful at helping us make these connections. So for instance, I mentioned one of the quick studies that I did, and this literally took me like 10 minutes, was a simulated client conversation.
Oh. The AI got you, Randy. Oh, there, you're back. You're back.
Something.
Sorry, Randy, your connection is breaking up.
About, but sort of enough. The idea was, okay, build a passive house. Yeah, what if we wanted to build a passive to sort of connect the dots, like expand what kinds of connections with nature we might be interested, what might
Zoom's AI is doing its best to parse your conversation or your comments.
Things like that.
Yeah, sorry, Randy, it's breaking up. But what I'm hearing, part of what I'm gleaning from what I just heard is that AI can be a good tool for brainstorming these sorts of connections. And that for me, in my personal work, I feel like the brainstorming function is probably the most powerful, and it's also something I can trust because I can say, oh, well, that's not a great idea, so I'm not just ignore it. It's not based on needing to be knowing that it's completely accurate. We are at the top of the hour. Again, thank you so much to everybody for presenting your insights and for all the work that you've done. For folks who are intrigued and would like to participate in a small group with a light workload over the course of the fall, we're going to be continuing the lab structure experiment this fall in the Reimagine Buildings Collective. So please check out the collective, and if you're not a member already, consider joining and joining in on this process. We're going to be doing a lot of fun work, and we're looking at connecting what's happening in the fall labs to the conference that we're holding, the half-day virtual conference focused on retrofits of existing buildings on December 5th. So that's something that that I need to talk with all of you about. But it's we feel like there's a really cool opportunity for some integration here. So with that, thanks everyone. Have a great Wednesday. Really appreciate everyone being here, and this is a great conversation.